What did Aboriginal Australians eat 50,000 years ago? You are hungry. Not the kind of hungry that sends you to the fridge at midnight. The kind that sits in your stomach like a stone. The kind that means the next decision you make could be the difference between eating and not eating at all. You are standing on the edge of a floodplain in what will one day be called the Northern Territory. The year is roughly 50,000 years ago. The air smells like dust and eucalyptus and something enormous that passed through here not long ago. You have no supermarket, no pantry, no backup plan. What you have is knowledge. And that knowledge is so sophisticated, so layered, and so precisely tuned to this continent that scientists are still unpacking it today. Because what ancient Australians ate was not simply a matter of survival. It was a complete food system, a nutritional philosophy, a way of reading the land that took tens of thousands of years to develop and passed from generation to generation without a single word being written down. So, what did they eat? The honest answer is far more than you would ever expect, and almost certainly more than you eat right now. Start with the basics. The land you are standing on is not the barren red wilderness that most people picture when they think of ancient Australia. 50,000 years ago, the continent is wetter, greener, and more biologically diverse than anything alive in most of Europe at the same time. The megafauna are still here. Diprotodon optatum, a creature the size of a hippopotamus and shaped like a wombat the size of a car, grazes on the floodplain not far from where you stand. Procoptodon goliath, a short-faced kangaroo 3 meters tall, moves through the scrub. Megalania, a monitor lizard that stretches to 7 meters in length, hunts in the shadows. These are not animals you chase lightly, but your ancestors do not rely on megafauna as a staple. This is one of the most important things researchers have worked out in recent decades. Archaeologist Peter Veth, who has spent decades studying the archaeology of Australia's arid zones, has argued that Aboriginal subsistence strategies were fundamentally built around flexibility. No single food source. No dependency on one animal or one plant. A diet so diversified that even when one resource failed, another carried the mob through. This is not accidental. It is the result of thousands of years of accumulated ecological knowledge. Knowledge that is held in ceremony, in song, in the routes walked across country. So, what does that flexible diet actually look like on a given day? In the tropical north, where the floodplains are seasonally drenched and teeming with life, your ancestors eat barramundi, freshwater crocodile eggs, magpie goose eggs, water lily seeds and roots, freshwater mussels, and the tubers of sedge grasses pulled from the mud at the water's edge. The lily seeds alone are remarkable. Nymphia macrosperma and related species produce seeds rich in carbohydrates and protein. They are ground on flat stone grinding slabs into a paste mixed with water and cooked directly in coals. This is bread. Real bread. Thousands of years before agriculture produces a single wheat grain in the Middle East. Let that sit for a moment. Grinding stones found at Budj Bim rock shelter in the Northern Territory, the oldest confirmed human site in Australia at approximately 65,000 years of age, include the oldest known ground-edge stone tools on Earth. Richard Roberts, whose luminescence dating work at Budj Bim helped establish that extraordinary time frame, and the broader excavation team, led by researcher Chris Clarkson, found ochre, reflective materials, and ground stone tools in the deepest layers of the site. Grinding technology is not a late invention. It arrives in Australia almost as soon as humans do. Your ancestors are processing plant foods into flour from the very beginning. Move south, into the interior, into what will become the Gibson Desert and the Great Victoria Desert. Here the landscape looks brutal, and for most of the year it is. But your ancestors know something about this country that takes outsiders decades to understand. They know where the water is. They know which plants signal its presence underground. They know when the desert blooms after rare rainfall, and they know how to be there when it does. Peter Veth's work in the arid zone has shown that Aboriginal Australians occupied Australia's desert interior far earlier than researchers once believed. They did not avoid the harshest parts of the continent. They moved through them. They read them, and they ate from them. In the desert, the witchetty grub. The larva of the cossid moth, dug from the roots of acacia trees. Rich in protein and fat. Eaten raw or cooked briefly in ash. Nutritionally comparable to a soft-boiled egg. Your ancestors do not eat this because they are desperate. They eat it because it is genuinely good food. Because in a landscape where large animals are scarce and unpredictable, invertebrates are reliable, predictable, and extraordinarily nutritious. There are also the seeds of the wattle. Acacia species across Australia produce seeds high in protein and carbohydrate. Harvested, dried, and ground into a dense flour that stores well and travels easily. Mulga apple, the sweet gall formed on mulga trees by insects, sticky and high in sugar. Bush tomatoes, the dried fruits of Solanum centrale, packed with antioxidants and vitamin C. Quandong, the desert peach, its flesh tart and vitamin-rich, its stone kernel cracked open to reveal an inner seed also eaten. This is not foraging in a desperate, random sense. This is a curated, seasonally mapped food economy. Anthropologist David Trigger, whose work on Aboriginal land and identity has shaped the field, has written about the profound way in which country and its resources are understood not as external things to be exploited, but as relationships to be maintained. The food is part of a relationship. The eating is embedded in a set of responsibilities. Move further south still, into what will become Victoria, into the western districts, where the Djab Wurrung and Jardwadjali peoples manage the land with a precision that staggers researchers when they begin to understand it. Here, the Budj Bim eel aquaculture system, built by the Gunditjmara people approximately 6,600 years ago, this network of stone channels, weirs, and holding ponds, traps and farms, short-finned eels moving between Lake Condah and the surrounding wetlands. It is one of the oldest aquaculture systems in the world. Older than the pyramids. Older than Stonehenge. And it produces a reliable, storable food source that allows the Gunditjmara to build semi-permanent stone dwellings and live in a way that looks, to modern eyes, startlingly like settled village life. The eels are smoked and dried for storage and trade. This is a food economy with surplus, with exchange, with the kind of long-term resource management that archaeologists used to believe was impossible without agriculture. Now, travel east, into the forests and river systems of the southeast. Here, your ancestors eat kangaroo and wallaby, hunted with spears and woomeras, the spear-throwing devices that extend the lever of the arm and double the force of the throw. They eat possum, it's fat-dense and calorie-rich in winter. They eat echidna, cooked in its own skin, in the coals of a fire. River fish trapped in elaborate stone weirs like those at Brewarina in New South Wales, the Njemba people's Byam Gunhu, a fish trap system so large and so old that some researchers believe it ranks among the oldest human constructions on Earth. And plants. Always plants. The yam daisy, Microceras lanceolata, harvested in autumn from the grasslands of the southeast. Its small tubers sweet and starchy. Researcher Beth Gott spent decades documenting the plant food knowledge of Aboriginal Victorians and found an inventory so vast and so nutritionally sophisticated that it would take most modern Australians a lifetime to learn. But here is the thing that brings all of this together. The thing that makes ancient Australian food culture genuinely extraordinary, not just by the standards of 50,000 years ago, but by any standard at all. The diversity. A 2020 study published in the journal Nature Plants analysed traditional Aboriginal plant food use across the continent and identified over 6,500 plant species used for food. 6,500. The average Australian today regularly eats perhaps 30 or 40 species of plant in a year. Your ancestors ate from a pantry so vast, it is almost incomprehensible. And the nutritional quality of that pantry was exceptional. Analyses of traditional bush foods have found that many are far richer in micronutrients than their cultivated equivalents. Davidson's plum has 65 times more vitamin C than an orange. Kakadu plum, Terminalia ferdinandiana, is the most vitamin C-dense food ever recorded on Earth. Quandong contains twice the vitamin C of an orange and more antioxidants than blueberries. Your ancestors were not eating poorly. They were eating extraordinarily well. The picture that emerges from the evidence is not one of survival on the edge of starvation. It is one of a people who had spent tens of thousands of years learning a continent so deeply, in such granular detail, that they could reliably feed themselves from virtually any part of it in any season. They had mapped its food resources through songlines and ceremonial knowledge. They had managed its productivity through fire, through selective harvesting, through the maintenance of fish traps and eel ponds. They had developed food processing technologies, including grinding and seed storage, that rival the technical achievements of agricultural societies that arrived thousands of years later. The reason this matters now, in the present moment, is not academic. When you walk into a supermarket, you are accessing a food system that has existed for perhaps 200 years in its modern form. A system built around maybe a dozen staple crops and a handful of livestock species. A system that, as climate change reshapes growing conditions across the planet, is increasingly fragile. The food knowledge that Aboriginal Australians carried for 65,000 years is not a relic. It is a model, a demonstration that it is possible to feed a population from a landscape without destroying it, without depending on a handful of vulnerable species, without poisoning the soil. You are standing on the edge of that floodplain, hungry, but not for long, because you know exactly what this country is offering you, and you know how to accept it. Just as your ancestors have always known,